Today, we're diving into an ancient ritual from the book of Leviticus, but it has this surprisingly powerful lesson for our lives right now. It kind of flips the script on our basic assumptions about connecting with God, and it suggests the first step isn't at all what you might think. So let's get into it.
So let me just start by asking this. When you think about getting right with God, or, just pursuing a spiritual path in general, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably prayer, right? Or meditation, maybe some big gesture of devotion. Most of us, we instinctively think vertically. We look straight up. But what if the real starting point is somewhere else entirely?
This quote just nails it. The idea here is pretty radical when you think about it. Before you can take that big vertical leap toward God, you first have to take a simple horizontal step toward the people all around you. It's a total reordering of our spiritual priorities.
So let's break down what this surprising first step actually is. You see, the ancient Israelites were taught that before they even thought about looking up to the heavens, they had to look around at their community, at their neighbors.
And this right here, this is the bedrock of the whole idea. According to the law in Leviticus, if you cheat your neighbor, if you lie to them, it's not just some private dispute between the two of you. The text is clear. It calls it a trespass against the Lord. The two are completely tangled up together. You just can't separate your relationship with God from your relationships with other people.
And it's absolutely crucial to understand that the very ability to make things right was, itself, a gift. God had already laid the groundwork for a relationship. He gave them the covenant, this family bond. He gave them the place of encounter where they could have safe communion, and He gave them the priesthood to mediate. These weren't things you had to earn, they were gifts of grace. And that means making amends wasn't about trying to earn God's favor, but about responding to the grace that was already there.
Okay, so what was the actual mechanism for this kind of relational repair? Well, it was a very specific offering with a unique name and a really clear purpose.
It was called the ʻāšām offering. And the key words you got to latch onto here are restitution and trust. See, this wasn't for just any old mistake. It was specifically for situations where you could point to the damage, where you could actually repair it. And, this is the big one, where a betrayal of trust was right at the heart of the whole mess.
So what kind of stuff are we talking about here? Well, the ʻāšām covered things like misusing something sacred or defrauding someone in a business deal. The classic example is lying to your neighbor about something they left with you to keep safe. Do you see the common thread running through all of these? They aren't just accidents. They all involve a deliberate breach of trust. They involve deception.
Now, this comparison is awesome because it shows you just how different this was. Look, if a thief got caught, they'd have to pay back what they stole, maybe even double or more. That's civil restitution. It pays the economic debt, it satisfies the law. But the ʻāšām was a whole different animal. It was triggered when deceit or a false oath was involved. Its goal wasn't just to repay the cash. It was about restoring your actual standing in the community. It was about mending the trust you shattered with both God and your neighbor. This brings us to the how-to part, the actual process. And let me tell you, it had a very strict, non-negotiable order. And the sequence itself just powerfully reinforces this whole principle we've been talking about. It was a simple, two-step process, and the order was everything. First, you had to go to your neighbor and make it right. You had to make full restitution. Only then could you go to the altar and present your offering to God. You couldn't reverse the order. You couldn't try and get vertical forgiveness while your horizontal relationship was still a wreck.
So that first step was a direct, face-to-face thing. You had to literally go to the person you wronged, confess what you did, give back what you took, and then, as the text says, you had to add 1/5 to it.
And that extra bit? It was 20%. Now think about that. This isn't just a penalty. It's a tangible, physical gesture of repair. It's an act that basically says, look, I'm not just paying back a debt, I am actively going above and beyond to show you how sorry I am and to restore the peace between us. And I really can't stress this enough. Only after that horizontal reconciliation was totally complete could the vertical part even begin to be addressed. First horizontal, then vertical. That is the central, most memorable takeaway from this entire thing. There was no shortcut to the altar that let you bypass your neighbor's house. So after, and only after, making things right with the person you wronged, then you would bring your offering to the priest. This was the final step. It completed the whole process. It secured your atonement and official forgiveness, and it fully reintegrated you back into the life of the community.
Both relationships, horizontal and vertical, were now finally restored.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit and think about the principle here that lasts. Why does this ancient ritual still have something to say to us? What's the big idea that we can carry forward?
Well, the core idea that endures is this concept of restorative righteousness. This isn't a kind of justice that's all about punishment. No, it's a kind of righteousness that's all about repair. It's about actively mending what's been broken in our relationships so we can restore peace and wholeness to the entire community.
But what's fascinating is that even this ancient system seemed to know its own limits. The āšām offering was designed for specific, repairable problems. It couldn't fix huge acts of rebellion or betrayals that just ripped the very fabric of the covenant apart. So the system itself was kind of pointing beyond itself, hinting that it wasn't the final answer.
And this is where the source material points to something really forward-looking, something prophetic. The fact that the animal offerings weren't enough, well, it anticipated a future, ultimate āšām. The prophet Isaiah actually talked about a servant who wouldn't just bring an offering, but it would become the offering itself to deal with those deeper fractures that the system couldn't touch.
And so all of this leaves us with a final question to really chew on. If the path to God really does begin with that horizontal step, if authentic spirituality demands that we first make things right with the people we've wronged, what does that actually look like for us today? What does restorative righteousness look like in our families, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods? It's an ancient principle with a challenge that feels more relevant than ever.